Hello student, I am starting from the last video. We are discussing about project scope management. So here you can see that the diagram of the project scope management. What are the inputs required? The inputs are like scope management plan, requirement management plan, and also stakeholder management plan, project starter, stakeholder register. These are the inputs. In case of techniques, these techniques are used to design many things like we do interviews, we create focus groups, we create facilitate workshops, group creativity techniques, group decision making, to inherit or to gather the information to requirements and other informations. These are techniques used, and also questionnaires, surveys, observation, prototypes. These are models used. What type of model is going to be used? Try to study those, try to use those techniques. Also context diagrams, document analysis. So everything will be done to create that project scope statement or project scope management. So, and the output will be requirement documentation and the requirement accessibility metrics. So actually this is also whole thing is actually kind of related with the requirement analysis. So we know that business requirements, business and project objectives, business rules for performing organizations. So business requirements are like business and project objectives. So we should have a business objective and we should have a project objective, which might be similar also, which might be different, but as a whole they might go together to complete the whole thing in a suitable or smoothly manner. Business rules for the performing organization, guiding principles of the organizations. So business rules for the performing organizations, there should be some specific rules to perform in organizations, also guiding principles of the organizations, and again stakeholder requirements, impacts to other organization areas, impacts to other entities inside or outside the performing organizations, stakeholder communications and reporting requirements. So these are different type of requirements with perspective of business and stakeholders. There is also solution requirements like functional and non-functional requirements, technology and standard compliance requirements, support and training requirements, quality requirements, reporting requirements. So these are solution oriented requirements. And again there are project requirements like levels of service, performance, safety, compliance, etc., acceptance criteria. So this is project requirements. So whatever we are seeing right now, whatever requirements we are trying to get to know, this actually in perspective of management. Transition requirements, assumptions, dependencies, constraints. So everything needs to be included in the requirement documentation, which will be also a part of the project scope management. So we need to consider something in case of any project. Is infrastructure setup part of your project? Means do you need to complete the setup of the infrastructure while doing the project, or is it a different part of your project, or is it a completely outside of your project? So assumptions that what are you counting on, this can be critical to identify. Resource expected like equipment, people, approvals, like that, to establish the infrastructure for your project. And also if it is not, if the infrastructure is not a part of your project, then you are not going to think about it. So those things will be critical to think about. Availability of partners, connections, the key limits, like for example system load expected maximum 100 users, like that. So you need to think about every pros and cons of the process. Suppose you don't using any, or you are not involved in infrastructure setup while for your project, then obviously there might be limits or kind of things like that. You cannot exceed those things. So so you need to maintain that thing, because you have not associated with the infrastructure setup. But if you have involved in the infrastructure setup, you might have changed that limit as per your need. So these type of critical things associated with the project, so you need to consider those things while creating any system or creating any project. So as an overview, we can see that the defined scope process means in the previous first and foremost slides of this video is mentioned about scope management. or project scope management. So we need to define the scope of the project. So that is why the defined scope process develops a detailed description of the project and product. So implicit and stated in the defined scope processes is the assumption that not all the requirements collected in the collect requirements process may be included in the project. Though compatible with adaptive and agile methodology, this assumption represents a less flexible process or approach to managing requirements and scope. So actually that defining scope process develops a detailed description of the project and the product, and again implicit means which is inherently defined by the scope of the project. In the defined scope processes is the assumption. So there is a assumption in case of defining the scope that not all of the requirements, means whatever requirements were collected, the list of requirements were collected in the collect requirements process may be included in the project. So there is no relation about these two, means how much information or how much requirements you have collected, all of them might not be in the process of development of the project, so which will be reflected implicitly in case of defining the scope. The project scope statement describes the project scope, measure deliverables, assumptions and constraints. So the project scope statement, the whole scope statement describes project scope, measure deliverables, assumptions and constraints. So everything like what will be delivered after the project, what are the assumptions we are carrying on while developing the product, and while it is going to be applied or deployed in some scenario. It might be in user environment, it might be in tested environment. So we need to create some assumption and we will go through those assumptions, and there may be some constraints also according to which the project will work or the deliverables will work. So we need to describe these specific measure things in the project scope statement. So then we need to go for product analysis. Product analysis is the process of translating high-level product description into tangible deliverables. Product analysis in IT includes techniques such as system analysis, requirement analysis, system engineering. So these steps or techniques includes in information technology to analyze any product. That is system analysis. We need to analyze the actual hardware system, and we need to analyze the requirements, which we have discussed thoroughly in previous modules. And systems engineering, we need to understand the engineering of the system. So these three type of things, or there might be other types also, there are other techniques also to analyze the product. So product analysis is the process of translating high-level product description into tangible deliverables. Alternative identification, that is the next one, attempts to uncover alternative approaches to executing and performing the project work. So this process or this step is to attempt or to uncover alternative approaches to execute your product, to execute your project, and performing the project work using techniques such as brainstorming and mind mapping, or might be other types of things also, to work out your project work, so that you might find out there might be other alternative or uncover alternative approaches to execute and perform your similar or same project work. So alternatives provides contrasting options to the planned approach, allowing better definition of scope. So suppose you develop a project and you created a plan, and suppose another competitor developed the same project using a different path or different alternative approaches, then, or suppose that approach is far more better than yours, then obviously your product will not be successful in the market. So that is why while you developing your own product, you need to understand other alternative approaches and steps through which your product can be executed. So by having those analysis, by having those identification, you can create the most advanced and needed path or approaches to execute your on project work. The project scope statement documents the entire scope, including project and product scope. So, project scope statement documents the entire scope, including project and product scope. So, project scope encompasses product scope plus the work required to create and product. So, project scope encompasses product scope plus the work required to create the product. Any project related activities such as documentation, delivery and training. So in case of project scope, it will be actually a overall set of scope which will include the product scope also, along with the work required to create the product, and also project related activities such as documentation, delivery and training also will be included in the project scope. But in case of product scope, encompasses the functional and non-functional requirements for the final project deliverables. So in case of product scope, encompasses the functional and non-functional requirements for the final project deliverables. The project scope statement provides a common understanding of the project scope among project stakeholders. So having a project scope statement will provide a common understanding of the project scope among project stakeholders, because there are lots of other stakeholders associated with a single project. So everybody needs to be in the same page. So having that same project scope statement and well defined project scope statement will provide the same understanding throughout that stakeholders. The project scope statement may contain explicit scope exclusion that can help to manage stakeholders' expectation. So the project scope statement may contain explicit scope inclusions that can help to manage stakeholder expectation. This can prevent the project from staying from the original vision in all project methodologies: sequential, iterative, incremental and adaptive or agile. So having the project scope statement may contain explicit scope exclusion, so which will contain some explicit scope exclusion that can help to manage stakeholder expectations. So which will prevent, and thus it will prevent the project from straying from the original vision in all project methodologies. So without having any project scope management, your main part or main approach of your project might deviate in different ways. But having a fixed and defined project scopes management or statement, your original vision will be in the same part or in the same approach, which will not go or deviated in other ways. So whatever methodology you are using, it might be sequential, it might be iterative or incremental or adaptive or agile methodologies you are taking in case of your project, it will stay on the same original vision due to your fixed project scope statement. Otherwise, you might deviate in different directions, which will cost you more. Project scope statement. The project scope statement contents include product scope descriptions, progressively elaborates the characteristics of the product described in the project charter and requirements. Second one is product acceptance criteria, conditions required for acceptance of deliverables. Third one is project deliverables. Deliverables include both product outputs and project outputs, such as project reports and documentation. Fourth one is project exclusions, identifies what is excluded from project. Fifth one is project constraints, lists and describes anything that limits the project's team options, such as budgets, imposed schedules, milestones, etc. Project assumptions, lists and describes anything assumed to be true with respect to the scope and impact if this proves to be false. Also, results of the defined scope process may affect other project documents, including stakeholder register, requirement documentation, requirements traceability metrics, which will not be discussed in these slides, but these are the things will be affected after defining the scope. So to create these things, we'll go through some technique of creating. So we need to create process is that we need to create a WBS or work breakdown structure. So WBS means work breakdown structure, technique for describing all work in a project. Then also there are part program evaluation and review technique, a well-entranced technique for or well-enhanced technique for scheduling. CPM, critical path method, used with part to determine problems in scheduling. Gantt chart, bar chart that graphically displays project schedules. So here we have already discussed this parts CPM Gantt chart. So we will only discuss about WBS in detail. So in case of the work breakdown structure is a hierarchical description of the work that must be done to complete the project as defined in the project overview statement or POS. The work breakdown structure is a hierarchical description. So it's a hierarchical tree-like description of the work that must be done to complete the project as defined in the project overview statement. And WBS terms activity. An activity is simply a chunk of work. Task. A task is a smaller chunk of work. Milestone. A task of zero duration. Usually an external event can be used to mark completion of an event or activity or phase. So these three terms will be involved in case of WBS. So we'll go to detail of this process of WBS, and maximum part of this whole slides will cover through this WBS, and we'll go detail one by one. So till now we have covered some slides in today, and again if you find any difficulty or confusion, or if you want to add anything new, then please let me know. We'll try to cover that over Google Meet. So we try to go to the books also, try to go to the literatures also about WBS. So that's it for today. We'll continue from these slides in next video. Thank you.